Hello, everybody, and thank you for watching our presentation. This is a collaborative presentation by Iye Ogbe, my student at the School of Conflict Management, Peace and Development at the Kennesaw State University, and me, Dr. Uddipana Goswami. I am a feminist peace researcher, and I started teaching at KSU in the fall of 2023. My first course at KSU was to teach Iye and her cohort a course on advanced qualitative methods, and I chose to teach them ethnography, critical feminist ethnography and autoethnography. So this presentation is an outcome of our experiences, our shared experiences in the classroom that fall of 2023. I will hand this over to Iye from here on out, and she will walk you through how we talked about theory and about embodied research in the classroom, and how the entire classroom started using a feminist decolonial approach to understanding knowledge making and research in the field of conflict and peace. And this is our joint autoethnography. Iye, over to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Goswami. I'm just going to go ahead and highlight this quote at the bottom of the title page here, which was a quote that was written in our collaborative autoethnography by Dr. Goswami. And it says, we must accept that all knowledge and knowledge-making processes are embodied, situated, partial, and subject to interrogation. And hopefully, as I go through my presentation, you'll kind of see the idea behind that statement. So this is the agenda. I'm going to talk briefly about when I was introduced to autoethnography, who introduced it to me, which at this point, we already have a brief idea of who that was, Dr. Goswami. And then what was the proposed method, how you can get to see theory as embodied practice, and then some final takeaways. So it was the fall of 2023. This was my second year, third semester in the PhD of International Conflict Management at Kennesaw State University. And during this time, we had a professor who walked in, and we could visibly tell that she wasn't from the quote unquote global north. She introduced herself, told us her name, and then also let us know that she was a feminist peace researcher, writer, and educator from Assam, Northeast India. And then sort of one of the first things that she mentioned was that research can be rigorous, creative, and subjective, and you just need to know how to do it. And for a few of my colleagues and myself, that was kind of confusing because being largely schooled in qualitative methods that remove subjectivity, this was sort of an interesting take on doing research. And so she talked about autoethnographies, and I had not heard about an autoethnography before. I knew what an ethnography was, or I had a slight idea, but I didn't really know what an autoethnography was. And so she broke it down. It's a qualitative methodology. You, as the researcher, are as well being researched, and you're the researcher. So that was something that we had to deal with, trying to piece that together. She talked about reflexivity and how that plays a huge role in autoethnographic research. And then embracing the researcher's subjectivity. And this I'll talk about in a few slides coming. But the main thing that we did at the end of the class was writing a creative nonfiction autoethnography. And I'll talk about that at the end as well. And again, there was a focus on the rigor of this kind of research, which was a very brand new concept to us. And this idea of writing in a public-facing manner, which was writing so that the general audience could understand. And for somebody like me who was used to writing like academic, in an academic manner, this was a very different taste because when you write academically, it's rarely for the general audience. So this process, there were a few ways that we were supposed to get to see theory and writing and autoethnography as this embodied practice. And the first lesson was Dr. Goswami taught us was to question our knowledge systems. And so it was a bunch of asking questions like, how do you know what you know? And then how do you know that what you know is the truth? And so initially, we started off as, theory as reading in the classroom. And she was trying to get us to the end point, which was theory doing theory. And so for evidence, she told us about Assam, talked about the invisible conflicts that happen in that region. And this is where she's from. Um, and to give example, she talked about the marginalization and knowledge making exercises where the knowledge makers from the outside of the region impose a story on the people from the region, and then they subsequently silence the stories from the real environment. And as another form of evidence, we read an article by Sarah Burton, which is the white theory boy, the monstrous white theory boy. And here, as we were reading this article, there was a bit of anger and realization that, well, some of the knowledge that's being produced is very bracketed and it's very featured as mainly from the global north. And as anger arose in me, especially, Sarah Button also said, well, don't focus particularly on the white theory boy, also focus on what made them get to this point where they produce knowledge that's mainly from this one-sided view. Um, and so these were some of the evidence that was given to us. And then we went to lesson 2, which was to go from just reading theory to actually doing theory. And what this meant was, like I said in the beginning, it's the researcher being the researcher and being the research at the same time. And this required that you have some embodied self-awareness. So you're not just aware of what you're seeing, hearing, smelling, but you're also aware of the quality and the tone of the sensations that go in us and come out of us. And this was where we were introduced to knowledge making as requiring reflexive praxis and it being an embodied experience. And that goes back to the quote that I mentioned on the first slide. So knowledge making is embodied. It's reflexive praxis and an embodied experience. Just before I get to the final takeaways here, um, currently I am writing my dissertation research and I am using decolonial feminist perspective as the framework for my research. Quite honestly, that's a framework that I'm still trying to understand. I'm still trying to wrap my head around as it relates to my research. But I can tell you a few things that using such a framework, um, writing ethnography, autoethnography is still in rigorous research. You do a lot of self-searching, a lot of thinking about what you're putting out there. And that's possibly one of the reasons why my research is stifled right now, because I'm really trying to um, do research in a way that represents the research population that I intend to focus on. And also trying to create knowledge that's public facing. At the point of this presentation, I and my colleagues have done a few presentations at a few conferences, this being one of them, and we hope to take this forward in the future and continue to be public-facing researchers as well as practice um, be embodied or let our research be an embodiment of who we are. Thank you.
So I just want to add to your final takeaways, where you say ethnographic research is rigorous. I would think autoethnography and ethnographic research is perhaps more rigorous than any other form of research, because you have to, critical ethnography and autoethnography, I mean, you have to include yourself. You have to think about your own compulsions, your own background, everything about yourself, right? When you are conducting this kind of research. So I have found that in my career, that this has been the most challenging form of research that I have ever done. And secondly, about knowledge being public facing, or the fact that knowledge should be public facing, right? It especially applies to our field in conflict and peacemaking, because real people, real world conflicts, right? And we need real solutions that are workable, that are applicable. And unless we think in terms of the people who are actually going through these conflicts, and unless we apply the kind of knowledge that comes from within their indigenous knowledge systems, I think conflict will endure and peace will not be sustainable, right? And I really appreciate your continuing to work with this framework in mind. So thank you, Iye, and thank you all in the audience for watching our presentation.
Thank you so much.